Good evening and welcome back to our broadcast and our discussion called the Old Testament is about you. We went back to the very creation in the last broadcast, and I wanted to remind you again, as we were talking about Noah, the story of Noah and the ark, and about paradise, that in the beginning God created and he blessed everything. And he's continued to pour out his blessings upon all creation, and bound man together with the rest of creation. Paradise was the place where man was present with the uncreated light of God, and experiencing that uncreated light and the grace of God directly and immediately. There are many mythologies about paradise and what it was, and I read some fantastic tale that paradise was a place where the fruit would fall from the trees and never rot, but turn to fresh, pure soil, sweet soil instantly, and that sort of thing. But the real fact is, paradise is there where man is in full communion with God. And paradise occurs when man experiences the uncreated glory, the uncreated light of God, and is completely encompassed by his uncreated grace. And this is what paradise actually consists in. But God has bound man together with the created universe. Man is a point of unity for all of creation. Mankind is material, intellectual, spiritual, made up of everything that the universe is made up of, but a combination of all things that occur within creation. And so he's really a point of unity with what man was intended to be. But by accepting the counterfeits of Satan, we became more a point of disunity. And all of these wounds and divisions that occur crept in amongst us. Now, we dealt a little bit with the story of Noah and the ark, and how people have to make a choice very often between spiritual life and spiritual death. And I would prefer for us to look at the story of Noah's ark precisely that way, because the ark is a type of the church, and spiritual life, real spiritual life, is there within the church because it is within the church that the tree of life still grows. In the altar of the church, which is a type of paradise, we receive from the chalice the fruit of the tree of life, which is Jesus Christ himself. So let's take a look then at something, the next part of the story of Noah's ark. We see that somehow all of creation was encompassed in the ark. A type of everything that exists, at least, was there. For God didn't command just various animals and clean animals, but clean and unclean animals, and plants, particularly those which could be used for food, and birds and creeping things. All of creation was encompassed in the ark, and they were all redeemed together with mankind, and represented by Noah and his family. And this is something like what Paul says, that all creation is being redeemed together with mankind, because all creation will be set free into the glorious freedom of God's children. So there's this very close bond between us and the created universe and the ecosystem in which we live. So we all should take from this story the fact that we are encompassed together with all the rest of creation. And we have a role to play, and that is as the center of unity in creation, so that our striving should also be to be a kind of point of unity within the church for all mankind, even if it's only through our prayers for mankind. When the ark landed, we find a rather disturbing story, and this is about Ham's betrayal of his father. You're all familiar with the story. Ham really humiliated and degraded his father, whereas the other sons of Noah were very respectful and covered their father. No matter what family we have, when we begin to raise children, not all of them really follow our teachings and follow our path. Some are led into a disrespect, but not just a disrespect, a kind of revilement even, of everything that their parents stood for. And sometimes a child is right not to accept everything the parents teach, because they come to realize that some of them are just prejudices, and sometimes they realize that we ourselves are perhaps pharisaical or too full of judgment and condemnation, lacking in compassion and that sort of thing. But there's this rejection of the whole concept, the whole idea, the whole system of values that the previous generation had, is what takes place in this particular incident. The complete disrespect for the parent, and therefore a disrespect for the values and the things that he had passed on to the children. And this always leads to some kind of sorrow and grief, because we don't realize that human experience has formed many of these basic values. Thousands of years of human experience. So sometimes when a child comes to this point of being completely rebellious against the parents and against what they've taught and passed on, particularly when the parents are believing people, they're not just rejecting what the parents have taught them, but rejecting also thousands of years of human experience which have taught us that certain things are necessary for survival, for the survival of societies, for the survival of communities, and then to reject the faith also. And this is what happens in this story. So how does it apply to us? Well, we also have to make these choices. Each one of us has to make a choice about how to deal with the values and the teachings, the instruction that have been given to us by our parents, our grandparents, and all. And to totally revile the parents can only lead to some kind of grief and sorrow. To totally reject everything and all the standards that have been taught by the parents leads to a degeneracy in society. And this is what the story of Noah's Ark is about in the beginning, as people rejecting the revelation, God's commands, relationship with God, and finding themselves swept away and drowned by their own passions. But those who were listening and heeding were lifted up in the ark, which is a type of the church and a teaching about the church, and carried above this flood. Self-control and self-discipline. When we see this story now about Ham's betrayal of his father Noah, and the great respect and reverence with which the other brothers approached their father, we also see something about self-control and self-discipline. The other brothers might have been tempted to look upon their father's nakedness and just out of curiosity, but they had self-control and they held self-discipline, and they didn't. And this is the problem with Ham. He had no self-discipline, no self-control, and therefore no respect and no reverence. Because without self-control and self-discipline, we also cannot have self-respect, or respect for others, or any kind of real reverence. So we need to understand that to develop self-control and self-discipline, this is about us. We do not have by nature, it doesn't just fall from the sky, self-discipline and self-control. It's something we have to struggle for and acquire. And this is why the church has given us the fasting rules, so that we can strengthen ourselves in self-discipline and self-control. This is about you. It's about the way you interact and you refer and respect for your parents and for the things that they've handed